Attention listeners, ahead are spoilers.
Calling all movie trap. Calling all movie trap. This is the movie trap.
And I am Russell Carlson. Welcome to the Movie Trap. And with me, as always, my host, Chris Boroff.
Go suck an egg.
And also with me, Zach Powers.
You know, Tracy, I kind of like that dame.
Welcome. We are in round 3 of Boroff's pick of failed franchises. If you don't know the show, we at the Movie Trap, each of us 3 hosts, pick a movie based on a single theme. Each of us, once we've watched all 3 movies, get to vote on that theme with an allocated amount of 10 points to start out with, plus some bonus points that go on in the end throughout the episode. And by the end of the 3 movies, which the episode you were on today, we will vote. And whoever's host's movie wins the point total gets to pick the next theme. So previously on the Movie Trap, we were in round 2 of failed franchises for Chris Boroff. I chose the very strange and odd movie Howard the Duck. And this week, round 3 goes to Zach Powers, and he has chosen 1990s Dick Tracy. And here we are today with Warren Beatty's Dick Tracy. But before we get down, let's get to the desk job business before we get out in the streets. What do you say? As of now, for points for final voting, Chris Boroff, you have 12 points with 1 more bonus point to give out. I have 12 points to give out with 1 more bonus point to give out. And spoiler alert, it's the same. Zach Powers has 12 points with 1 more bonus point to give out. So we are equal across the board, I think, for the first time ever.
Maybe ever, yeah, very egalitarian.
Yeah. How about this? Well, I mean, if we really think about it, failed franchises can and has led to just pain. But sure. Not this movie, I would say. I would say not. This is, I mean, I think it gripes me a little bit that I think Zach's probably going to win this one and run away with it. And I'll get into that later.
I don't think in a regular round this movie would be good enough to win, but in this round it probably is.
Yeah.
I mentioned this last episode. I did not choose a ringer. This was my choice before Russell even announced his, because I think this movie's kind of got a fascinating backstory.
Sure,
but
and I'll get into the fringes of the theme as far as failed franchises in regards to this movie. But before we do that, Zach Powers, why don't you strap on your radio wristwatch and communicate to us what is Dick Tracy?
Dick Tracy is a 1999 crime film, I suppose, based on a 1930s comic strip. It was produced, directed, stars Warren Beatty, along with Madonna, Al Pacino, Charlie Korsmo. It is the story
a cast of thousands.
Indeed. A lot of big names in small parts. It begins in the 1930s. It's sort of, for those who don't know, Dick Tracy, sort of loosely based on Elliot Ness and his pursuit of Al Capone. So it's the 1930s, and it's probably Chicago or Chicago-ish. I think that's where Dick Tracy does take place, though this might be like a fictional pastiche city. And the mob has control of the streets. In particular, Al Pacino as Big Boy Caprice has been taking over the corners, killing rival gangs, and fastening his grip around the crime in the city. Meanwhile, Dick Tracy, enemy to all mobsters and crime, catches a young pickpocket, trying to steal his change, and eventually, with the help of his girlfriend, Tess Trueheart, takes the kid in for a limited amount of time. Big Boy, who's killing all of his rivals, kills a fellow crime lord named Lips by dumping him into a huge box full of cement and dropping it in the ocean. And
they
takes over his...
Giving him the bath. Going for a bath.
Yeah, going for a bath.
And in the process of killing him, he takes over both his club and his girlfriend, Breathless Mahoney. So Tracy is spent some time interrogating them and ultimately gets to the club where Breathless refused to give him the information despite witnessing the murder, but does try to seduce him. So Big Boy, trying to become the kingpin of the city, brings in all of the other criminals, all of whom have varying degrees of prosthesis all over their face to make them look like the cartoon characters from the 1930s comic. And attempts to say, listen, I'm the big kingpin, all the rest of you guys work for me, take it or leave it. One guy doesn't. His car gets bombed, which Tracy sees, but is again unable to pin directly on Big Boy. Big Boy then kidnaps Tracy, realizing he's his only weakness, and attempts to bribe him into getting onto his payroll. Tracy refuses stupidly because he should just pretend to accept the bribe in this situation. He's literally tied to a chair in the bottom of a warehouse. So
you could literally report it and say, hey, I just got bribed. Here's the money. Put that in as evidence.
Say,
anyway.
oh yeah, sure, I'll take it.
Yeah,
what do you think they're going to do? They try to kill him.
I'm just going to run to the office real quick.
But I mean, in that film's defense, it's also not a film that has any like subterfuge or subtext as far as Dick Tracy's concerned. He's so clear about what he's thinking at all times that having any degree of like ambiguity as to how hard he goes against crime would go against the mantra of the whole show.
He doesn't have like a personal motivation so much as he's a cop. Like he's just a cop, doesn't like crime.
Not a lot of nuance in this whole movie.
Yeah. So they try to kill him after he refuses the bribe, because obviously that's what they're gonna do. But the kid comes by and saves him and becomes an honorary police detective. After Breathless again tries to seduce him, Trueheart sees them kiss and leaves town. At which point there is a raid on Big Boy's properties. Big Boy captures one of the officers in the raid. There's a setup at a warehouse, the same one where they killed Lips earlier in the movie, and Tracy is saved by a character called The Blank, who has no face and a weird-ass voice. The Blank initially attempts to work with Tracy, but it doesn't quite work out. The Blank then goes ahead and tries to take down Tracy with the help of Big Boy, who still doesn't like the Blank because the Blank killed some of his guys. But successfully, the Blank frames Tracy for the murder of a corrupt DA, I think it was. Yeah. At this point, Big Boy, with Tracy out of the way, has the world at his feet, more or less. And eventually, however, gets framed for kidnapping Tess Trueheart, and eventually gets out on bail. Tracy also gets out, interrogates Dustin Hoffman as Mumbles to get the information on Big Boy's whereabouts and the club and all this shit. And there's a huge gun battle where almost all of Big Boy's men are killed. Big Boy flees to like a clock tower or something, and where he plans.
It's like a drawbridge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where he plans to crush Tess Trueheart in between the gears, but the Blank appears, holds them both at gunpoint, and offers Tracy to take over the city once Big Boy is dead. Big Boy manages to fire on the Blank when she gets distracted by the kid. And then Tracy manages to send Big Boy falling into the gears of the bridge, killing him, presumably. The Blank, dying, is unmasked to have been Breathless the whole time. Tracy is a free man. All the charges are dropped as the truth rings out. The kid, now Dick Tracy Jr., is adopted by Tracy and Tess, and they presumably have a life of adventure, stopping even more crime. That's basically the plot of Dick Tracy. It's kind of a messy one, I feel like, but that's what it is.
Yeah, the Breathless character, I think, had more of an arc to her character than Dick Tracy did. There was a lot more going on with Breathless that added deeper questions. And, it also has the very obvious, like, breathless, faceless. They're both the same character. So, yeah, I don't know.
It's also, I don't know about more of an arc. I mean, the problem with this movie is that, when it came out in the 90s, everybody compared it to Batman. In fact, that's why Disney signed off to make this movie, because this was supposed to be their Batman.
But, it had Danny Elfman doing the music and everything.
And it sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? The theme song of... But yeah, they compared it a lot to Batman, and saying that Batman's, like, psychological trauma was at the forefront of the Burton movie. And, there's a lot of things about the Burton movie, but I would not say that is in the forefront. Now, I will say Dick Tracy has almost no humanity. There is nothing there. He is... Sure. But there's not like there's anything there's not much there to Breathless. There's not much there to Big Boy. They're all caricatures. Sure. These aren't really. I mean,
the other thing is, obviously, I feel like there's that scene in Batman where Jack Nicholson's Joker has his face painted to make him look like flesh toned, but he still has that huge smile. He would not be out of place among the rogues in this movie,
right? Sure. Sure.
We barely alighted on it, but every villain character in this movie has insane face makeup to make them look like these caricatures from the comic. And Beatty even considered doing it for Tracy himself, but ultimately abandoned the idea.
I mean, it looks like all of their budget was just worn on faces of the actors in this movie. Like, it's really strange because you brought up the makeup thing. And, like, later, we've seen things where people do this sort of stuff. Well, I mean, we watched Border, and that was extreme makeup, but it was sort of implied by that story. But even if you go to something like Sin City, right, where it's a similar, like, stylized story, everybody looked like people except for Marv, who was the only one who had, like, a very specific cut look of his face. So Mickey Rourke had that stuff on his face.
The Nick Stahl character, the yellow bastard.
But they were all done in a way that was, like, more acceptable in context with the rest of that world. Like, in this one, these guys look like monsters that just popped into the movie. It's really strange.
I think that's actually a perfectly good... I think the comparison to Sin City is... Like, even in Sin City, there's stylistic flourishes, like the glowing glasses. And what they're doing, really very much so, is recreating frames from the comic. And in this, that is what they're doing. Like, they have these matte paintings... They have these weird lighting choices. Beatty specifically limited his color palette to 7 colors, the same 7 colors used in the comic strip. So the reason this movie is so strange and colorful is it's intentionally, like, recreating frame for frame those panels, including making these characters these weird monsters. And indeed, in Sin City, there's also that guy, the yellow monster, who's like...
the yellow bastard. Yeah. But also, it's not just Beatty. I mean, he also had Vittorio Storaro. I mean, like, one of the legendary cinematographers of the era, who knew how to do really... So what he did with that color palette is really make it look black and white as well. I mean, the way there's sharp edges, everything's really noiristic. He's doing it in black and white, but it's these splashes of color. It's a taste thing. I think when you consider the 90s is all like this dark edgelord sort of shit, like all the Burton stuff and that kind of... It's kind of refreshing that this movie exists. But before we get any further to this, I do want to get to the meat of my gripe with this movie being chose as a failed franchise. But I'm going to read through my thought process and come to the conclusion that I'll allow it. Because is this really a failed franchise? It was massively successful. Massively successful. It made a lot of money. There were McDonald's toys. There were Mattel toys. There was you could buy the talking watch. I remember because I bought them because I loved this movie as a kid. I was the exact target demographic for this fucking movie, and it landed. I loved this movie. I loved the soundtrack. I loved the costumes. I loved all the gangster bad guy stuff. I bought all the toys. I was a huge fucking fan. So, I mean, it doubled its money. I mean, the reason why Disney let go of it is because it wasn't as successful as Batman. So, I mean, is it a failed franchise or is it just not as successful as it could be? However,
I'm going to give you a definition here. They wanted to make this into a franchise and then they didn't.
Okay, well,
Like, that was explicitly the plan. Explicitly,
Well, yeah.
the plan by Katzenberg and Eisner was like, this will be our franchise, a flagstone
Correct.
franchise for Disney, and it wasn't.
Right.
That's a
Right.
failed franchise.
Well, and that's why,
Yeah.
and the reason why I'm allowing it is because, you know, when we go back to when Boroff announced the theme of failed franchises, his impetus for it, if you will, was Master and Commander. Now, Master and Commander did pretty well at the box office, but as he said, it was completely swept at the Oscars. Dick Tracy won some Oscars.
Sure.
Not all the Oscars it was nominated for, but it did win some pretty good big Oscars for some pretty big name people.
Production design and song and shit
Okay,
like that.
but
Yeah.
still, it's
But, I
still
mean,
Steven
with-
Sondheim. I mean, like
To-
that's not
to-
no, you know that.
To Zach's
So,
point,
anyway,
though,
to go back
it
on
didn't
that-
lead to more movies. So it's like there are other films where they threw
And-
tons of money at it. Like
Correct.
this.
We'll get into that later as far
Okay,
as
okay.
what planned sequels will go. But I also want to say the reason why I'll allow it is because, let's face it, this movie's largely forgotten in American culture and zeitgeist. Nobody thinks of this fucking movie all that much anymore. Like, nobody really even gives it a second thought. It doesn't nearly have the cultural cachet of like Beetlejuice or even other weirder things, like even Drop Dead Fred. I think
it's-
has more of a cachet than.
But I mean, I think there's a reason for that. It's almost completely humorless. Like it's such a dry
I don't know,
take
Mumbles
on
was pretty
this
funny.
story. He might be funny. He's on screen for like I think 2 minutes, and this movie's almost 2 hours long. So it's one of those things where it's like he makes an impression, but man, there's a whole lot of bread around that sandwich you got to get through.
Well, this movie, I think part of the problem there is the identity of this movie, what it wanted to be, I think, is not always certain, and part of that is because how this movie was developed. Like, Disney was originally going to release this under the Walt Disney name, and they saw it and it was like, no, we have to do it under Buena Vista. There's too much adult shit for us
Yeah.
to release this under, like, the Disney brand.
People being
And
shot,
part of that's
people
Beatty.
like being too horny when they walk into scenes. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
And let's be real. Part of that's Warren Beatty. I mean, part of that, Warren Beatty he's the one who bought the fucking rights to Dick Tracy.
Right, which
he's
is
the
an
one
interest. That's part of the backstory.
Yeah, so
We
I
get
mean,
into
like part of that is Warren Beatty. So like another reason why I think that Warren Beatty never intended to make a sequel, that he was going to throw everything at this movie and be done with it, because he threw in almost every single character in the Dick Tracy canon. All the other previous developments of Dick Tracy were Dick Tracy versus Flat Top, or Dick Tracy versus The Blank, or Dick Tracy versus 88 Keys. Like, they were all specific to one guy, because that's what the model for comic book movies was. But Beatty threw everything at it. The whole poker game at the beginning, those are all Dick Tracy characters. Those are all straight from the comic books, and he wipes them out in 2 minutes. So I think Warren Beatty never actually, whether Disney or not wanted this to be a franchise, I very much guarantee I don't think Warren Beatty ever intended to make a sequel, and I still don't think he does.
Well, whether or not, I'll say two things on the subject. One, according to Beatty, in both June of 2011 and April of 2016, he was thinking about making a sequel still at those times. He has constantly said he is hoping to make a sequel to this movie. And additionally, if he didn't want to make a sequel, there's a little thing, Cat 2008, it aired once on TCM. It's called the Dick Tracy Special. It's just Dick Tracy talking to fucking Leonard Maltin. Do you know why that was produced?
I do.
Because the rights to Dick Tracy were going to lapse, and Warren Beatty's like, if I make this, I can keep them. So now
that's pretty much it.
So desperate to keep the rights. If he's not going to do anything with them, why the fuck bother?
Wait, how long
Precisely.
after the movie was that? When you guys sent me that link, I assumed it was to promote the movie. What?
2008.
No. Oh, no, this was a ploy because Warren Beatty was in a legal dispute with the Tribune Company, who was the original licensor for Dick Tracy way back in the day when Warren Beatty bought it. Now, there was a clause in that contract that in order for Beatty to maintain his control of the rights, he had to keep pursuing to make more avenues. So it never happened.
They always
and
make
it never
Fantastic
happened.
Four
And
movies.
it never
That's why
happened.
they always make Spider-Man
Right.
movies.
So it went all the way to court, and then Warren Beatty makes this bullshit with Leonard Maltin, and the judge says, well, that's enough to prove he wants to make a sequel. And I'm like, what? That proves he's not going to make a sequel. This is him just rubbing his face in it. This is, I mean, like, even
God.
If you have a chance, it's on YouTube. Watch it because it is equal parts informative of the history of Dick Tracy, but it's also very cringeworthy. It is saying something when Leonard Maltin has more of a comedic presence than Warren Beatty does. I mean, like, it is cringeworthy.
We're talking about the behind the scenes of this thing. Let's talk about it for just a little bit and how this came to be, because it was not always going to be at Disney. It was going to be, I believe, at Paramount, right? And they offered so many people this movie before Warren Beatty ever got a peek at it. They offered it, this is like the early 80s, they're offering it to like Steven Spielberg. For a minute, John Landis was going to direct, and then something happened on the set of The Twilight Zone, and he got bumped for reasons. They passed it all around to all of these different directors. Like, eventually Walter Hill came on board, and he was the one who brought in Warren Beatty. And they had a disagreement. Walter Hill's like, I want this to be a realistic-ass movie. And Warren Beatty wanted it to be like this. And
somebody
so Walter
having
Hill
a disagreement with Warren Beatty, I won't hear of it.
So Walter Hill walks. I'm not. Let me finish this like real quick background thing. Walter Hill walks, and they go on so long that Paramount loses the fucking rights, and they lapse. So Warren Beatty personally comes in, buys the rights, goes over to Eisenberg and Katzenberg, and is like, "We can make this thing." They consider bringing in Martin fucking Scorsese to do it initially. That obviously doesn't happen. Beatty passes it all over town to the Coens, to Sam Raimi, to everybody. No one wants to do it, so he's like, "Fuck it, I'll do it myself. Fuck it, we'll do it live," is what he says.
Yeah, right. Yep. It
goes super over budget.
Was Breathless always Madonna?
Well, he was dating Madonna at the time the movie was made and came out.
Okay.
Yeah.
This was Warren Beatty famously like slept with everybody in Hollywood. A year after this movie came out, he met Annette Bening, and they've been married ever since. So Madonna was kind of his last rodeo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why Warren Beatty bought the rights because he wanted to play Dick Tracy. I mean, it was more important to him to play Dick Tracy than it was for him to direct. But Warren Beatty's always kind of, since he's one of those actors who. Anyway, he thinks a lot of his own vision, and for what it's worth for Dick Tracy, it works in this movie because he's leaning into 1930s tropes of gangster movies and musicals. That's what this movie is basically cribbing off of throughout, down to the shallowness of each of the caricatures. The nice part about Warren Beatty is he was friends with everybody. So everybody, like Dustin Hoffman pretty much only worked on this because they worked on Ishtar together, and I guess they have a bond of kind of hating that movie, which I think that movie gets a bad rap.
I think those dudes were also party pals back in the day. Like they were they were carousing and hitting up women at the same time and things like that. So
but this, I want to say one other behind the scenes effect of this movie. After this happened, and this was like Disney was in a bad place. This was before the Disney Renaissance. They didn't have a big franchise. They were hoping this would be it. After this came out, didn't really work out for them. The marketing was too much. Ultimately, like, it didn't come out to the amount of money they wanted. So Katzenberg puts out this memo where he makes two predictions. One, we should step away from blockbusters. That obviously didn't end up happening. But two, we can't gamble on artists that have like all these visions. We need more studio control over what we produce. And that part absolutely fucking happened.
Yeah.
Very true.
Well, except for Star Wars, the one that just happened. Nobody was in charge of that particular ship.
We'll just make movies that talk at each other. Anyway, and for what it's worth, I think that even though they are just caricatures. I think they're all done pretty well. Al Pacino stands out. He was nominated, and this is sort of
appropriate.
Yeah, but this is before the era of where he sort of becomes that all the time. This is like right at the beginning, where he played that. And I think it looks like he had a lot of fun with it. One person who I think didn't have a good time doing it, it seems, was Warren Beatty, because it just doesn't look like he is just joyless. And I understand that's his read on the character, but like that's not a very fun character to watch. You know, like it's not. I'm not going to say
Dick Tracy is indeed in many ways the most boring part of his own movie.
Yeah, but there's a way you can make that work. I mean, they try, you know, with the whole love triangle with Breathless and Chess and.
I mean, the thing is he has some pretty serious dad energy in this. Like, I know that, like, there's a lot of tough guys that get to later career, like Charles Bronson and things like that, where you're like, all right, I can accept that, like, Terrence Stamp would still punch me in the face if I showed up. Warren Beatty doesn't seem threatening in that way, which I think is probably why he was so successful with women for so long. However, sitting in this movie as an audience member, even knowing that Madonna and Warren Beatty were seeing each other at the time this was happening, I can't help but be severely creeped out by all the sexy scenes involving Madonna and Warren Beatty, because it is incredibly uncomfortable. As I get closer to Warren Beatty's age and further away from Madonna's age, the concept of those two being in a couple situation is extra creepy because they're so many years apart. But I would like to also just say, like,
no question.
What did you guys think about the tonal shifts involving Madonna's character? Because, like, everything seems like it's a fairly run and gun, shoot 'em up. And then when Madonna's character comes in, the dialogue and the presentation suddenly changes to be real lascivious, but not in, like, the sultry way. In, like, the very direct, like, single entendre way, where it's like I think she walked in from the water or the rain at one point, and it was either hot outside or rainy outside.
The first part...
And her whole thing when she walks in that made me want to nope out of the scene was she opens the door and she says something like, "I'm dripping," or something like that. "Aren't you going to let me in?" And I was like, oh, come on, guys. There's better ways to...
It's ice cream and it's going to melt. Yeah, it's ice
Something
cream
like
and it's
that.
going to melt.
Prior to her showing up, the only thing I could think of was he's got this Tess Trueheart, he's got this kid he's adopting, and all I could think about was that scene in Barton Fink where he's like, "A dame, a kid, a dame, a kid, a dame and a kid." That's all I could think about for the first...
Great movie.
Which is good. I mean, I guess it makes sense. This is a 1930s, like, send-off in a way. Like, there is a throwback sensibility to it. But you're right. The stuff with Breathless it would not fly probably in that era in the same way.
I don't think it would fly in the current era.
Well, it wouldn't fly in this era, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, if we're talking pre-Hays Code, they were pretty. I mean, like they were pretty racy at times, but you know, in the 20s and such. But like, and in a way, Dick Tracy is sort of harkening back to those times. The character, the comic book itself. So like, even in the 30s, it's still kind of looking towards an era that's not really around anymore, which is the Prohibition era.
I mean, I guess that makes sense, but I'm comparing it to things like Babyface. Like, I think Babyface is a great example of like pre-Hays Code, where it's sexy, and the lady had a lot of personal agency in her sexual choices, which was something completely unusual for that time period. So when you see someone like Breathless, who essentially isn't really... She's like the dumbed-down version of what that character was doing, but without any of the backstory or any of the, like, cause for, you know, using men. There was no Nietzsche quote in this.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Somebody saw that Barbara Stanwyck film. John Wayne's first movie. Anyway, does it... Let me ask you guys a question. Does that soften it a little bit, knowing it's Madonna herself, that like a woman in the late 80s who invited controversy and invited sort of like exhibitionism and that kind of thing? Does that soften it a little bit for you, considering it's Madonna?
She actually wanted this role. She got paid scale for this because she wanted the role so badly. Yeah. So still like what, third in the credits still, and you know, So go ahead.
I can understand that. I mean, it definitely played to the presentation she had publicly at the time of being kind of a sex pot and things like that, and she's tried to keep that going as long as possible. But there's just a way in which it plays versus what we saw on screen. Like, it seemed a little less charismatic and more like, let's get it on right now.
I agree.
So it didn't
I think
really
you're
have the
right.
presence.
And to be fair, among almost everybody, one of the people that this treated the best is probably Madonna, because on her tie-in album for this movie, she wrote Vogue, which was like a pretty big hit for her. Like she had literally an album called I'm Breathless, and that's where the song Vogue comes from.
That's amazing. Yeah, and that's why I it kind of, and that's even the same thing with Al Pacino playing Big Boy and how big he is, and how over the top he is all the time. With Al Pacino, it kind of works because he's got that energy and that instantly recognizable howl. And it works because he's so twitchy all the time in this movie, and even the way Dustin Hoffman, as brief as it is, like to make Mumbles what Mumbles is, because I mean in the comic book it's just like a question mark. It just that's all it says. It just question mark. So for Dustin Hoffman to sort of create a sound like Mumbles is pretty cool. And Dustin Hoffman, again, he's barely in it, basically did as a favor to Warren Beatty, but still like delivers. That's even James Caan, who really small part in here, but really, really like you remember it, like, well, then it don't work.
This, and I mean, to me, the most impressive poll, because this man, like, so Stephen Sondheim, debatably the greatest musical theater writer in the history of time, probably almost certainly the 20th century. Don't give me that Andrew Lloyd Webber shit. He's an asshole. Telling me Cats is good? Come on. But this guy, he did 2 fucking movies like that weren't like, people adapted his movies and all his plays into movies all the time. West Side Story and Into the Woods and all that shit. But in terms of doing original stuff for movies, he did it 2 times. He made a song for Reds, which Warren Beatty directed, and he did 5 songs for this, and that's it. It's the only time he ever made original music for movies, and I can't believe that Warren Beatty was like the one guy who got him to do this shit.
Warren Beatty had a lot of credibility in town for a long time. I mean, he still does, but it's just you never see him. Like, I've heard stories of seeing him live, like when he just appears at parties and people get really excited still because it's like, oh my God, it's Warren Beatty. We haven't seen him in years. And it's got that sort of like thing that leads into the room.
It's so strange because I feel like he took years off between movies, and now I feel like as a Hollywood icon of that era, I feel like he's one of the more forgettable ones. Like, I doubt most kids know who the fuck Warren Beatty is, but they know who Harrison Ford is, Jack Nicholson.
Guys, we watched the Parallax View, and we literally determined that none of you have seen many Warren Beatty films. We've already gone through that. Like, McCabe and Miss Miller,
I'm definitely, I'm more of a Shirley MacLaine stan than anything else.
Okay,
that's fair enough. The group.
I mean, Bonnie and Clyde. Anyway, Warren Beatty. I don't know. I kind of can go both ways with Warren Beatty. Like, I sort of think he's overrated in many respects. I'm not really a fan. I mean, even in this movie, I think what I like about this movie is the achievement of his vision and the circus of characters that he's managed to wrangle into one movie. With the performances, and clearly his cachet in Hollywood works because he got fucking everybody in this movie. And that's why this is probably his best film is the problem. As far as Warren Beatty directing, I would say this is probably his best film. Yeah. The movie that came immediately after was Bugsy, and now it's about a real guy, Bugsy Siegel. And that movie is okay. But it sort of, the problem with Warren Beatty playing him is, like, Bugsy was kind of crazy and kind of nuts, and you only saw flashes of that in the movie. And I don't think Warren Beatty's quite got the range.
Yeah,
that
I think the thing about this movie is, let's reimagine a world where Warren Beatty, like the things that won, we mentioned best original song. I think it won best production design and best makeup. So those were the weird swings stylistically that Beatty decided to make with this movie. Let's imagine an alternate universe where he made it more realistic. They filmed on location in Chicago. They considered doing that. They don't have like these weird colors and these matte paintings. All the gangsters just look like fucking, it's Al Pacino. It's not Al Pacino with a big ass goofy chin. It's just Al Pacino. This movie would be, if anything in that situation, more forgotten, I would imagine. Like, I think the things about this movie that are memorable and that make it so you kind of can't forget it in a way, even though everybody did, are the weird swings, and they're the stuff that got rewarded at the Oscars. Nothing else about this got rewarded at all.
Well, I mean, it's style over substance, kind of directly. Like, I would ask you guys, what is this movie about? Like, what is the main arc? Like, what is the thing they have to accomplish? What is the problem they have?
Yeah. The plot is as thin as a comic strip. Yeah. Like, the comic strips it's based on.
Yeah, and it's saying a lot that it's like doing that in a movie where there is it does the things it's supposed to do. There is a mid-act or a center of the film switch where you're suddenly pivoted. Warren Beatty as Dick Tracy's in jail. Oh my God, he's been fooled into something. He's been hoodwinked. But the scale of what's important in the film really kind of falls by the wayside. You're like, all right, well, I guess we want him to end up with a kid and the lady, and everything else is going to be watching stuff happen until there's a determination on if that happens.
Yeah. It sort of mistakes, you know, the character conflict with character development, and without ever having the two meet. You know, like the core character conflict with Dick Tracy is just the love triangle between Tess and Breathless, because it's not like Dick Tracy doesn't want to be with Breathless Mahoney. So that's the core conflict, but there's nothing revealed in his character that makes you think he's going to go one way or another, other than, you know, he can't be with Breathless because she's this vixen femme fatale, sort of on the other side of the law, you know, so to speak. That's the only, and that's nothing to do with him. That's just to do with like this sort of one-dimensional, I follow the rules all the time. You know, that's not really all that anyway. But at least it's with Warren Beatty, he's got the range to pull that. I'd say he's got the range to pull that off pretty convincingly.
Yeah, frankly, like, I agree. And I'll say this, like, in terms of the plot, everything, like, again, I like some of the villain performances in particular. I think they're hammy enough to be fun, in particular Al Pacino. Like, Al Pacino in the 90s, like, he did a lot of like big swings.
For sure.
Here, it's like, what else are you gonna do when you look like that? Like, this is what, you know, this is the perfect role for the kind of big-ass Al Pacino energy. I will say, when I described the plot, you probably found me meandering a little bit. Like, there are parts of this that are like, I can barely keep straight in my head what happened when. And the blank as a character confuses the shit out of me, because, like, she helps Tracy, then she goes to Big Boy and does the Joker, like, I'll kill the Batman thing, and then she frames him, and then she frames Big Boy, and then at the end she goes back to Tracy and is like, I actually want to work with you? And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? I don't understand what this plan is.
Yeah. When I said her arc was more interesting, it was simply because it was more confusing to a degree. Where I was like, oh, okay, there's questions I could ask after this. But because you said the thing about imagining an alternate world where this was ultra serious, I'd like to ask you guys this: how would you fix this movie? What would you do to make this palatable? Because for me, it's a little dull.
I mean, it would be useful if you gave some humanity to Dick Tracy outside of just following the rules. I mean, even his relationship with the kid is more of a, well, I mean, maybe I'm okay with the cartoon aesthetic of the movie. What I'm not okay with is the cartoon aesthetic of the dialogue, you know, where it is just no subtext. Everybody says exactly what they think. There's no mystery. There's something to dig too deep. But again, I mean, this movie was kind of marketed to kids. You know, I mean, it was sort of teenagers.
It feels like the Batman TV show a little bit. Like it's got that same level of arc and stuff. Yeah.
Funny you should mention that, because Danny Elfman famously did the theme song for it, at least the not Sondheim songs. and did not like working with Warren Beatty. Called him crazy, which I'm not surprised to learn. That happens a lot, it seems like. Ask Gene Hackman. But I do think it's interesting because Danny Elfman's longtime partner and composer is a woman named Shirley Walker, and she's the one who did the music for Batman the Animated Series, and she did the composing on this one and included working with Sondheim. So good for her. That's why Stephen Sondheim's songs in this one are awesome. They are. For a guy like me who's not big into musicals, but the way this movie does it, it's more like the 1930s, Busby Bixby sort of stuff, where it's more like
is it
visual
Breathless's
montage.
Scenes?
Yeah, the singing and dancing. There's multiple.
Both of the Breathless scenes. There's one that's like We're Back in Business, which is like a montage of the mob plays over it. There's a couple others. I think he wrote 5 songs.
Yeah, and like the one where Mandy Patinkin and Madonna are sitting by the piano. I think he wrote that one too. So like those are really good. The Danny Elfman score is Batman. Almost by the numbers. It is Batman. And do I think that's his fault? I don't. I think he had commands. You know that Batman movie you did? Do that. Do that. Because I'm not going to lie, when I was a kid and the 1989 Boot Me came out, my favorite part was the Danny Elfman Batman theme. That was, when I was a little kid in my little Batman pajamas, I would literally rewind the opening credits just so I could hear Danny Elfman's score again. That's how much I loved it. And then you go on to Dick Tracy, and it is almost the same. So I don't know if that's Elfman's fault. He does have a type in a lot of his compositions, but I do think that everybody from Disney to Warren Beatty said, that Batman thing, do that. No, it's not enough like Batman. Do Batman. Yeah,
it didn't really seem like it went with the movie exactly, because it had a lot of, like in Batman, whenever that big music's happening, there's big stuff happening on screen. It's like, oh my God, the Batmobile's going up the side of a building, or there's something exploding. And in this one, it was usually...
the Joker's got a gun that's like 20 feet long.
Yeah. Or in this one, they wander in, and it's just like, it's a guy at a table. He's got a weird face. They're all getting shot. And none of the deaths really mattered unless it mattered to the plot. Like, this was very much like Stormtrooper, like gunfire everywhere until something happens in the plot. You need someone to actually die.
Yeah, Flat Top and Itchy meet their end so unceremoniously that you barely notice it.
There is one, I think conceptually, The Bath is pretty gnarly for a movie aimed at kids this age. Like the idea of like literally dumping somebody full of cement and throwing them in the ocean still alive is pretty. I think that one's pretty rough.
Yeah, but that was also something that was common in the parlance at the time. Like sleeping with the fishes was like an in joke. Like everybody would make that joke when talking about like gangster films and gangsters and stuff like that.
Sure, but again, you're like, are you making a kids movie or ain't you?
Yeah. It is kind of a hostile moment. It's a little intense.
Sneak its way in there because you don't actually see any violence. It's all in your imagination a little bit. So as a kid, you're like, well, that's okay. Bring on the colorful costumes again. And that's why I don't know. I grew up loving this movie. I really did. I loved this movie. I was always a sucker for these gangster movies. I love the nicknames. I love, I've always been a sucker for it. And when I was a kid, this may have been the first kind of foray into like 30s gangster films that I didn't even know I was being acclimated to. So I give Warren Beatty a little bit of credit for that. But that's why I think the difference, here's the difference, Borif, that I think what would I change in this movie? I think the difference between this movie and the other 2 movies that we watched, and I think the difference between what Disney wanted and what Warren Beatty wanted is prevalent. Whereas I think Warren Beatty wanted to make a good movie, and I think Disney wanted to make a successful movie.
Sure.
So it's kind of walking that line of like, Warren Beatty is wrestling control of this movie to just make it as stylistic and as kind of out there as he can, but Disney's there trying to pump the marketing and the toys and the McDonald's and the costumes and all that stuff, and none of it like really paid, so much to the point to where they released the toy of the blank, and you could take the mask off and reveal it's the Madonna and totally spoil the movie. And in fact, so much so that fucking action figure is like a collectible now because they had to pull it because they were going to spoil the movie.
Wow.
So that's the difference. And we think about the previous two movies we watched too. I mean, both of those movies were not designed to be good movies. Those were designed to be successful movies.
Sure.
This was kind of walking that line of like, I'm going to make a good movie and hopefully Disney makes some money. If not, oh well. Because Warren Beatty was sued after this movie was made for withholding profits to producers. And I don't know the outcome of that court, but like this was a contentious relationship.
Yeah, I mean that's the classic thing of like whether you get points before or after the taxes have come out, just due to the fact it's Hollywood, or it's what do they call it? Hollywood taxes or Hollywood income. I can't remember the term they always say, but you know what I'm saying.
In a way. Sure. In a way, you kind of blame Iger and Katzenberg anyway. I mean, they spent as much money on the marketing as they did on the movie. That's sort of, I mean, that's typical nowadays, sure. But that's sort of on you then. Like,
yeah, it's kind of funny that like you remember this so fondly. Like for me, I don't believe I've never seen
you guys
this
have
movie
never seen this,
before
right?
this.
No.
Not for me.
Wow. I mean, like I said, as a kid, I was
a while back, I heard some of the crazy things about the making of this movie, and I was like, you know what? I am interested in seeing what that's about as a result of some stuff I'd heard incidentally.
I don't know.
Mostly about the making of.
I was 10 when this movie came out, so for me, like, it completely missed me. Like, I didn't care about gangsters and stuff, but it was also before I had discovered girls, so the Madonna stuff in this movie was just... And I didn't really pay attention, and I was like, I don't really dig this. But it's also a solid 53% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I think this one, you might be remembering this one as a better reception from your own childhood. I think this one still kind of bombed.
Absolutely.
Did it actually make its money back?
It did make its money back. It just didn't do super great.
They just spent too much on the marketing, and they didn't. It wasn't as successful as Batman. That was what the number was, and it never reached that threshold. I mean, it was one of the bigger movies that came out in the '90s. I mean, it was a huge movie. So, like,
and I will say, returning to what I said earlier on the podcast, it was, I did not. There are things I could have picked as failed franchise starters that could have been ringers. I did not pick this as a ringer. The fact that it's 53%, like, not fresh, only works because the other two movies we watched are like 13 and 16%.
Yeah. It's like, what size of Vegemite do you want to have to choke down on a cracker?
I mean, guys, when Borf announced this scene, I did fucking warn you that, like, we might be in for some pain.
For sure.
And even Dick Tracy, like you say, I mean, I watch it as an adult now, and yeah, it doesn't land like it did, but I'm still sort of like, it's fine.
I don't actually. I will say about this though, just speaking of the round as a whole, this was. I'm glad because I feel like a movie like The Mummy, first of all, feels like a kind of movie that under other circumstances we would never discuss, and it's a kind of movie that fully exists. And I think it's worth covering at least one of these things that's like so made by committee, made by like the higher ups at the studio, just because it is a thing, it's a real phenomenon, and we have to look at it at least once, right? And then the other two picks, I gotta say, they're interesting. Like, they're not, there is interesting stuff in both of these picks. So I'm glad we
here's
went out
how
of our comfort zone and talked about some weird shit.
Yeah, not to harp too much on it, but I'm kind of going off of that jive there because, like, the way I compare this whole round was like The Mummy was like a roller coaster ride I don't ever want to go on again. Howard the Duck was like visiting a museum exhibit where you're like, I'll be damned. Like it was more like, oh, what? They did do that, didn't they? And this movie was more like seeing my old playground from elementary school where I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that bit. Okay, yeah. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, I'm hard pressed to really have an opinion on the Mummy at all, outside of the fact that it existed. The Howard the Duck was cool, I think mostly from the sense that it was just like seeing a car accident. It was like seeing a horrible, horrible car accident and going, wow, you really can go through a windscreen. But Dick Tracy's pretty okay. But it's one of those movies where I was just like, man, it would have been so much more fun if it had just come out like 10 years later. They had someone else who was like younger and maybe crazier directing it. Like, it seems like a movie that was screaming out for someone really unhinged to direct it. Like,
and you're not happy with Warren Beatty?
I mean, he's fine. But it would have been fun to have something that was just a little crazier, maybe something that had more colors to it. Like, I know he did the thing with 7 colors, and I think the 7 colors thing's great, but if you're going to go for it, really nail it. Like, go for something like they did on The Aviator, where they did, like, the 3 color strip color thing. But that was after they had digital intermediates, of course, which didn't exist in this. It wouldn't exist for, I think, another 6 years until Pleasantville came out.
So I'll just... the thing where I first... got a bunch of information about this movie and how weird the backstory was. There's a video essayist named Patrick Willems who put out a video sometime back about this movie. And that's kind of where I was like, I gotta see that at some point, and this was an excuse to do so. And one of the things he said that he compared this movie to, where it was trying to emulate the style of its source material so directly, and so purely, that he thinks, and I have not seen this movie, though I know it has big fans. And I've definitely seen frames or scenes from this movie, and I know it's stylized all to hell. The one he compares it to, aside from Sin City, actually, is Speed Racer, which is absolutely, like, colorful as shit. It's like an anime style, and I do think that this would have probably benefited from, like, waiting 10 years for the technology a little bit to come around for some of like the shots to look a little more vibrant and a little more like both real and cartoon at the same time.
Yeah, and also I think take another whack at the character Dick Tracy himself. Like make him some little more. Well, just like he needs to make a decision, and he never really does. The decisions are always the people around him making decisions for him. I mean, you
can give him a little bit more of a personal stake in the story instead of just being like, it's my job.
Did he really choose Breathless Mahoney, or did Breathless Mahoney accidentally just get killed? There's no real choosing here. It's just like, well, she's dead now, so the choice is made for me.
I mean, maybe that's how we ended up with this movie. Maybe Dick Tracy really is Warren Beatty, and there were just no decisions made at any point in the movie.
Well, if you watch that fucking Dick Tracy special, that's what that is.
Except for style choices.
My God. Ugh, Jesus. And this is what I love about it, too, is that, in that stupid special, he like bitches about Warren Beatty's like choices of all the colors and stuff, but he's in there in the yellow jacket. He's wearing the yellow jacket. He could have just come in there with a normal fedora and a fucking raincoat. I mean, anyway. So I don't know, guys. I guess we got to get to the voting since we've already kind of.
I guess that kind of was that our final thoughts. I guess it kind of was.
Yeah, it kind of was. I mean, like I said, I guess the only thing I have to add is that like. I only like it as an adult for what it is, and that's a return to the nostalgia of my childhood. Sure. I guess it's not that surprising how forgotten it is, considering how bold some of the choices were for the time. I know the color is a dividing line here, but I sort of enjoyed the way, considering that this is before digital intermediate and it's all matte paintings and stuff, it kind of works still. It looks good. I mean, I like the way it splashes in there like a noir film, but with this color palette. I mean, Warren Beatty gave this DP the choice of colors, and he ran with it. And it was like, fine, we'll just put it fucking everywhere then. Even down to the production design. Red phones and, like yellow fire hydrants.
Specifically, he was like, you can use the 7 colors the comic was printed in, and that's it.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess I agree. Like, I think that there are things about this movie that I do find really interesting, and like, Some of the the style choices, the way it came into being, the way that Warren Beatty holds on to these rights and made that weird fucking special, like that stuff is very fun to me and very funny.
Yeah, he's just holding
and
it
a couple
out
of
of spite.
performances. Yeah, obviously I think Pacino is like the most fun out of the cast here. But out of the big names anyway. No offense to that kid from Hook and Can't Hardly Wait. But then there's also like the plot is meandering and mishmash. The character motivations are barely extant. I don't give a fuck about Trish Trueheart or whatever the fuck her name is. So it does, it's interesting. It falls down so fundamentally, but there's enough interesting things on the edges that I can't totally write it off.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of same for me. I think Vittorio Storaro's work is impeccable, as always. But outside of the technical stuff in this, it looks pretty. It sounds okay. Stuff does happen. The makeup looks okay, even though it's a horrifying choice that I think is such a sore thumb to me. I couldn't get into the rest of the movie. But it's not something I would suggest someone to watch outside of intellectual or academic interest at this point.
Or in my case, nostalgia.
Yeah.
Because I was 5 when this movie came out, and I loved it.
Sure.
Sure.
And it is, you're right. I think this movie is really forgotten. I don't think people talk about it ever. Howard the Duck still has this weird reputation as being this monstrosity. This thing, I don't think no one remembers this thing.
Yeah, Warren Beatty's going to make sure of it. Well, you guys, for the first time ever, we're stingy on our points. We've each still got a bonus point to give out, so we've got 12 points to divvy out for final voting.
Okay.
So go ahead and get your placards ready, and we'll get down to business.
Okay.
This is a painful vote, guys. This is a painful vote.
I think it'll be a tight.
It's hard. It's just so hard.
Yeah, it's like what temperature of tap water do you like the most, guys? Do you like it hot and steamy, or do you like it room temperature? Do you like it a little bit cold, fresh from the tap?
Slightly revised. I gotta slightly revise.
I mean, it's
I can't.
12 divided by 3. What do you do?
Oh, okay.
Alrighty, I'm ready, I guess.
All right, which one are we starting with? Gonna do them in order?
We gotta start with
We are
the
starting.
money.
Alrighty. Okay, hold up. Let me get my map, my abacus ready. Okay. Okay, so Chris Boroff for The Mummy. What's your point total? What are you giving it?
I'm giving it a 4.
Wow. I am giving The Mummy a 2.
I'll come in right in between you two and give The Mummy a 3.
All right, so that gives The Mummy 9 points. Boroff.
Unbelievable.
Remarkable. I cannot wait to see what this next movie gives me. Quack, quack, Boroff. Howard the Duck, what do you got?
I am giving Howard the Duck a 3. And
I'm giving Howard the Duck a 4, and it's definitely did not earn
I thought
it.
about it. I think I have to give Howard the Duck a 4 as well. I think I
Okay.
have to give it a 4 as well. So
All right, so Mummy is out. We are now at 11 points to beat. I don't think this is going to be close. Chris Boroff, calling Chris Boroff. What do you got for Dick Tracy?
gave Dick Tracy a 5. Go suck an egg, Tracy.
There you go. I had to give Dick Tracy a 6 because I'm still a little kid at heart.
I also gave Tracy a 5. Dick Tracy a 5.
So Zach wins with Dick Tracy everywhere I look. It's Tracy, Tracy, Tracy. And Zach wins the theme with Dick Tracy. Well done indeed. Yeah, that was a tough vote. I'm surprised. I'm really shocked about the Mummy's total. 9 points to the Mummy. That's amazing. Remarkable.
I mean, it really just got there by being the most basic pick.
Sure.
And there's so much not great in this round that.
And I get why.
In another round, in another round, the Mummy would have gotten like 3 points, maybe not. Like if it were possible to not get. I don't know if you can give zeros on this. I don't know if we've discussed that.
But then when you stack it up against Howard the Duck, like what do you really do? I get why Boris rated it lower than the Mummy, because again, Howard the Duck was painful at points. You're like, God, gouge my eyeballs out. The Mummy was just boring.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that leaves us with once again Zach Powers with 16 points, runs away with it. Zach, what are we doing?
So, we're also talking about nostalgia, and frankly, I also think that there's an imbalance on this podcast. You guys went to your fancy-ass film school and all your fancy-ass film terms, watched your fancy-ass, pretentious film school movies.
CFS is the anchor of the top 50 list. We're right there at number 50, anchor.
I got a different degree that's useless from you guys. And so I don't have all the film knowledge. So I decided to even the playing skills and take you back to a time before you had your film degrees. I'm going to take you back to movies you loved in high school. Your high school favorites. Absolutely. And we're going to see how your taste holds up.
Good Lord. Borf in high school.
That is going to be the real test. How generic were you? How does your taste hold up? I think that's going to be fun.
We're going to be watching Titanic.
Start with, sophomore year, I realized I could like big boy adult films. And so I started doing the thing that any good person grows out of around the time they become a freshman in college, but many people don't. But my shitty young film phrase clearly started with Reservoir Dogs. It simply did. And so I think that's going to have to be my pick. I think I'm going to have to go with Reservoir Dogs.
Okay, so I get it. It's
all right.
It's not just the default ones you like, it's the ones that give you more a sense of prestige.
I don't know. I think you can attribute whatever your favorite movie was at a given. If you have a time where you can remember, there's like 3 or 4 movies I could have picked that at a given time in high school I probably would have said were my favorite. I just thought, me and my friends would go to fucking speech and debate tournaments in like suits that looked like the Reservoir Dogs suits, and I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna go with that one because it seems like for a minute I was clearly into that movie too much. So
awesome.
Whatever that means to you. If it's great, hey, maybe it's fucking great and you just loved a great movie in high school and whatever.
It's going to be strange because I know what my movie is, and to piggyback off of yours is going to be kind of odd, but that's okay. It'll work. I'll make it work. Okay, well, that will be fun to harken back. You guys are already made me harken back to 5 years old, so I guess I better go back to the age of puberty. And because that's, definitely Dick Tracy is a prepubescent movie. There's not a lot of it's not, I mean, yeah, you're a little, you feel funny things about Breathless, but, you didn't really care. You wanted to get to Flat Top and Itchy doing their gun toting thing.
Yeah, we know that the sexy scenes between Flat Top and Itchy are the most important ones for a young prepubescent boy.
The romance, the cut romance story between Flat Top and Itchy.
Just two misshapen faces mushing.
A precursor to Brokeback in many ways. Too controversial for the time.
Okay.
But very forward-thinking in how handsome everyone involved in the sex was.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Just like Larry McMurtry would have wanted. So I guess on that note, this has been the Movie Trap. Thank you so much for listening, and tune in next time for a brand new theme with a brand new round and a brand new movie. Except not for us, because we're going back to the high school days. Tune in for Reservoir Dogs. Thanks for listening. I've been Russell Carlson. For my co-host, Zach Powers.
Fuck it, I can't remember a Dick Tracy line. The bath?
And for my partner, Chris Boroff.
Breathless, please get off my desk. This is uncomfortable for me. This is an office. See ya, everybody.
Alrighty. Have a good night.
Okay.
And as we always say on the Movie Trap, and we could say again for this movie, as well as Warren Beatty being too old for Madonna, Diane Ladd is too young to be Chevy Chase's mom.
Yeah, that's the Movie Trap promise.
You were very gracious, but I didn't mean to be impertinent.
I'm going to be 107 in July. Yes.
No.
Yeah.
107?
107.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have some secret you can share with everybody?
SP. Small portions, and exercise, and of course, pomegranate. Once in a while, I'll have a blueberry.